conversations and reflections from yesterday. I look forward for a very engaging session today as well to hear your thinking, going more and more practically into education and the work of transforming understandings on peace building and education. So before we go more detailed into today's session, I wanted to invite you to connect back with our conversations from yesterday. Yesterday, we talked about the role of education, what type of education can strengthen peace building, how this link between education and peace building, and what sort of approaches can really be useful in this work. So thinking of that, I want you to, as a starting activity, think of a symbol that comes to your mind when you think of transformation. We talked a lot about transformation yesterday. So when you think of transformation, what is a symbol, image, a symbol, animal, whatever that comes to your mind? I'll give you, yes, Marilu, what comes to your mind?
When it comes to transformation, the first thing that comes to my mind is a butterfly. As you watch the whole life cycle of a butterfly, from when it's an egg to a caterpillar to a larva to when it goes into the cocoon to a butterfly, all that is a transformation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marilu. A beautiful butterfly. Yeah, it really makes you imagine a process of transformation. Ines, I see your hand also.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning. I think I had the same idea. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Eunice. Yes, butterfly is a beautiful image of transformation. Any others? Any other ideas? Any other symbols? What comes to your mind when you think of transformation? Ilona, did you want to add something? Vaka, I see your hand.
Yes. So once I get to think about transformation, I look at a young kid from a fetus, and then they become a baby. Then from that, they begin, trying to stand, crawl, and then crawling, they try to stand, then get to walk, and then get to run. So I think that transformation.
Mm-hmm. The growth of a human, transformation of a human being. Thank you. Vega Yehu. Vega Yehu, you're muted.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Transformation, when I think of transformation, it comes the attitudinal change, the skills change, it comes the hurts, it connects me with heart. It's not only with my mind, it connects myself with my heart. So when I think of transformation, I always think of that, the symbol of heart that stands for love, peace.
Thank you, Vegayehu. Yes, very powerful. That transformation needs to happen not just in our minds, but also in our hearts, how we feel and relate to other people. That also has to change in terms of when our attitudes transform. Anyone else? In fact, oftentimes when we talk about transformation, we say the heart, the heart, the head, and the hands have to come together. All three has to come together. Sometimes we say when transformation is taking place. Our knowledge, our thinking has to transform. Our heart, our values, our attitudes, our feelings has to transform. Hands, our ability, our actions have to transform. So for those who just joined, we are just having a small startup activity, and I've asked participants to share what sort of a symbol or image or what comes to your mind when you think of the word transformation. If anybody else is interested to share, maybe one person before. I saw Richard's hand. Richard, did you want to add also?
Yes, I wanted to add, I had right around me a little seedlings like of a plant. It's not a replant because I don't have a replant with me, but how the little seedlings of a plant grows to become a massive tree in the forest, for me represent an enormous transformative process and something that comes to mind when I think of transformation, that process of life changing from one stage to the other, which can be connected to the butterfly story as well.
Thank you. And I think the seedling actually connects well to what we want to talk about today. How do we nurture this transformation? Yes, transformation, there's things that automatically will happen, but the role of education is also to nurture the space, provide the nutrients as a seedling requires, keep watering the seedling so that it grows into a strong plant and a tree. So like that, how do we create conducive spaces, educational experiences for learners that we work with, young people, children, adults, whoever, so that it becomes a transformative experience for them. I think that's what we are going to explore today. So to start with, I would like to introduce the whole program that UNESCO ICPA has been running over the last 3-4 years is titled around transformative education, transformative pedagogy. So we have a short video that we'll start with to introduce this transformative pedagogy, and then we'll go to discussions afterwards. So let me quickly share this video. Sorry.
In line with Sustainable Development Goals and in order to ensure quality education for Africa, UNESCO ICPA is working on developing a critical mass of teachers able to implement effective teaching, essential for grooming peace-loving and productive youth.
That's why we use transformative pedagogy. This kind of approach empowers both teachers and learners and encourages learners to be reflective and critical thinkers.
Transformative pedagogy doesn't mean teachers provide students with peace-building skills. The students come up with their own knowledge and approaches.
They are exposed to local as well as global issues, introduced to diversity, are led to develop feelings of humanity, empathy, tolerance, and understanding, and by consequence, display the behaviors that promote peace and social justice.
So why exactly do we need transformative pedagogy?
Because it encourages ethical reflections in classrooms.
Because it builds the competencies of peace builders.
Because it supports peace building.
Because it supports safe learning environments.
Because it creates an understanding of conflict.
And because it supports from classroom to action.
To further explain what transformative pedagogy means, let us draw a little analogy.
Previously, teachers were trained to consider themselves as those who impart content. The common assumption was that while the teachers know everything, the students know nothing. The teacher could hence be depicted as a jug full of water filling an empty glass.
However, transformative pedagogy opposes this dynamic and instead puts the learner in the center. It combines critical thinking, reflection, self-awareness, ethics, and meaningful action. So rather than filling an empty glass, this approach enables the student to grow just as a flower blooms.
To guide teachers, UNESCO has developed the so-called whole framework, designing 4 approaches needed to get the most out of the learner.
Whole is a means to address specific issues and be sensitive to the local context.
Ownership ensures that projects are led by the students who take responsibility.
Participation and partnership are required to create linkages between learners, schools, and communities.
And finally, empowerment turns learners into confident individuals with diverse skills and leadership.
This all creates hope for the youth, empowering them to contribute to a society that can sustain peace, a desired goal of our teacher's guide, which you can find on our website.
Now, for transformative pedagogy to occur, a stable, safe learning environment is needed, which is why we have developed another manual on how to keep schools safe and productive. Here are just some of our tips.
First, evaluate the specific threats posed to children and the weather-related hazards of your region.
Then come up with an action plan in case any risk occurs. You can as well identify locations that could be used as temporary learning spaces.
A school safety committee with involvement of students and the community will help to spread awareness.
Involving parents is crucial too. A community may be needed to escort groups of children or teachers from school.
And even simple little things, such as having all the school staff wear unique ID tags, can help reduce reaction time and prevent damage.
Again, this is just a sample. For more recommendations as well as tips on how to make your own safety manual, visit our website.
Yeah, hello everyone again, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So this is a great video that we see from UNESCO IGBA and the program they are running, talking about transformative pedagogy. And I like the idea of the exercise just now that we had to think about one image that represents transformation for us. I think this video rightly presented some of those ideas. Now the idea for us is to kind of dipping a little bit into this topic about transformative pedagogy and the different elements that were shown at the beginning of the video, but that some of you already did mention yesterday when we were looking at what makes an education transformative. Some of you already mentioned some of those elements. We would be presenting those elements according to the guidelines that you have received, I presume, on the chapter 3, which talks about transformative pedagogy. Those elements are enumerated there. What we would like you to do now, when we break you up into groups, is to look at each of these elements and to discuss in your group, for example, in context sensitivity. What does it mean, context sensitivity? When you hear context sensitivity in the case of a transformative education, what does it mean for you? And how can you create this, how can you bring this into concrete practice in your educational program, but also in the formation program that you run in the case of those working in the non-formal education sector? So we want to look at both levels, not just in the formal education system, but in the non-formal education system. What is this element for you? What does it signify? And then how can you practice it? How can you concretely bring them into bear in your organizations, in your schools, in your institution, whatever the case may be, where you run your programs and activity? So this is what we would like you to go into group now to do in the next 20 to 25 minutes. And we would have you come back in plenary, where we will try to discuss some of those elements as the case may be, and the suggestions that you would have on how to implement them. So Sushit, if you would display the elements and the group again, let's see. Yes, so these are the elements. It's first, context sensitivity, safe learning environment, participatory and collaborative learning, whole school approach, supporting learners-led initiative or action, and role modeling. So these are the 6 elements that we consider in the guide as transformative elements or elements of transformative pedagogy. So what does this mean for you concretely, and how can you practice it? This is what the exercise will be. And you will now receive a prompt to go into groups. And in each of your groups, you have to discuss each of these elements, try to appoint someone who will report back. But what we would, in terms of reporting back, we probably will need you to focus on one of the elements as according to the group. You will discuss OCs, but the reporting back will be based on one element, and then the others can add to what you have said in terms of report back. So we encourage you to have someone who will take note and who will report back to the group. So when we come back, we don't have to start looking for who will do that. But when you go to your group already self-organized, find someone who will moderate the discussion and another person who will take note and report back to the group. So as you may be seeing on your screen, this is how the group are arranged. So according to the number 1 to 6. So the group that you fall into, if you fall into group 1, you would only be expected to report back on content sensitivity, but that does not mean you don't discuss the other 6 elements. You would have to discuss all 6 elements, but report back on 1. Except if someone have a question or clarification, I would ask that we break now, but feel free to raise your hands or to use the chat if you have a question or a comment that you want to make. If something isn't clear in the instruction of what we need to do now, kindly let me know. Okay, I don't see a hand raised, so it means everything is understandable to each of you. Again, yeah, what is this element? What does it mean for you and what does it include? And how do we strengthen this element in the program that we run or in our school system, whatever the case may be.
Questions are shared on chat,
So
but if you want, take a picture as well so that you know when you fall into the group, which element to focus on in terms of reporting back. So if you have a mobile phone, maybe just grab a quick picture. So at least one person from each group, then it helps to know which element to report back on when you come back into plenary. So you will get now the invite to join the breakout rooms.
Manasseh, you would receive a prompt to go to your group now. So it's already shown on your screen. You
Yes,
just
of
have
course.
to click on
I will
it.
join. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Our discussions went well. For group 3, we discussed about participatory and collaborative learning and how that can be able to help in transformative pedagogy. So some of my group members were kind enough to share their insights and thoughts, and some of the insights that we shared was that participatory and collaborative learning is essential for transformative pedagogy because it helps us to achieve the goals of peace and education. How this could be achieved is because when we include the learners in the lessons, they are able to share their minds they're able to share their thoughts, they're able to share their feelings. And by doing that, we develop an environment whereby learners can be able to freely share what they feel, and it helps develop that learning. It's also, because it's learner-centered, it means that the learners take charge in the discussions they lead, and by doing that, they're able to exploit their potential, and they're able to process information well, and even by the examples they give, they can give real-time examples in the society and in the community, and also they can suggest ways on how they can go back to the communities and be able to impact those communities in a positive way. And also we discussed that the teacher needs to undertake or understand or develop some teaching techniques to suit this element of collaborating learning. So the teacher needs to come up with the correct learning techniques. For example, we may not be able to use a lecture method in class when we want really the learners to participate in the learning. So maybe use of examples, questionnaires, or just methods or techniques which will help enable the learners to participate in the class. The teacher also needs to provide and create an environment in the classroom whereby learners can feel they're at home and they can feel free to share their thoughts and discussions. And also we need to create a good atmosphere in the classroom. So this good atmosphere enables the learners to feel comfortable while talking about their social life, and as well as talking about the issues affecting them. Another thing, when we come together and learners participate, it enables them to network, and it encourages self-driven learning, whereby not every time they're reminded by their teachers to do this or that, but they can push themselves to doing some other things as well. So some of the ways we can strengthen this element is by coming up with mentorship programs. Mentorship programs help learners be paired with mentors, people experienced in certain fields, so that they can know how to apply these principles learned well in their societies. Another key thing that we were able to discuss was about effective communication. Effective communication can strengthen this element, because when we communicate well, it means that the message can reach faster and more effectively to the target audience. Those are some of the things that we're able to discuss in our group. Maybe unless if there's any member of my group would like to add.
Thank you very much, Cyprian, for this wonderful report back for your group. Feel free to also share this in the chat if you wish. And if there is any addition that anyone would like to add to that, feel free to add it in the chat. I will move to the next group. Maybe I see Jane. Are you reporting for your group, or you want to add to Cyprian's position? And after that, I will take Essie Francis. Reporting for group 6. Okay, that's great. So okay. I will take you now, and then after Francis, you can take. Yeah.
Okay,
Jane,
thank you.
go.
For group 6, we're supporting the learner-led action. So we came up with a definition that the learner-led approach is it's actually student-based, and it is an approach that is involved based on the assumption of learners, making everyone realize that they have unique skills, given different experiences. It was also said that it can be defined as a learner center, which involves teaching, and it enables the learner to have full participation. Then we have a list of so many advantages, because if there is a learner-led action, if there is a learner-led approach, it enables students to express themselves freely. It enables the learner to make contributions freely, because they understand and they observe the changes in their environment. It enables them to develop self-awareness. They can express their views and their opinions. It also enables them to research always and to make them to become critical thinkers. Then For the disadvantage, there was a disadvantage because it enables the learner not to have proper guidance. Then to strengthen the elements, we see that it motivates the learners. It acts as a driving force for learning. Then the method needs to always be updated so that learners can contribute new ideas always. And for improvements, a plan strategy needs to be up. Then teachers should be encouraged to focus on the learner-led approach. Then the learner should be open to ask for guidance, and also high expectations for student achievement should be set to enable them reach their goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane, for sharing your group feedback, wonderful feedback from your group number 6 on learner-centered, learner-led action. Also, kindly do share your report in the chat, and if anyone from your group wish to add or pose a question, feel free to put that in the chat as well. I will take you now, Francis, pardon, and then I will take Manasseh after you. Francis.
All right, thank you so much. Our group 2, we were looking at the safe learning environment, and we looked at from different angles, and we discussed with our members, and we came with the conclusion of what is safe learning environment, which is focused on both academic achievement, if I can say formal and non-formal, maintaining high standard and fostering positive relation between the staff and student, and also encouraging parental and community involvement. That is what it made to us. Now, when we look at what includes in safe learning environment, that's like a component. We looked at the safety, the engagement, look at the connectedness, and also the support. Then we went ahead to discuss in our own various countries. We looked at the seating arrangement, availability of learning materials, approach of active learning and engagement too. Then also we looked at the way how to strengthen safe learning environment. First is we looked at the classroom atmosphere and design that is conducive to learning, and it should feel joyful and friendly and be designed around clear focus area called centered learning environment within student, parents, and their community and their staff, and so on. Then we looked at another way of strengthening, like for example, the teachers or the lecturers should guide academic growth and model classroom behavior, and even beyond model classroom behavior that they should offer to students, and engagement that can not threaten any student or teachers themselves when they are sharing the information. Then we looked at designing university policy that to tackle issues like bullying, drug trafficking in school that distracts learners from learning and achieving a lot of their academic goals or their learning materials or any goals they set. Then we looked at the discipline and social emotional development. Now, when we look at that, there is so much that is lacking in our education system. If I'm not wrong, Africa at large and majority of African countries are lacking discipline and social emotional development. So how to strengthen that? It should help students to understand their feelings and interact with their peers within the campus or within the institution and between the lecturers and their teachers. So by discipline and social emotional, it helps students to reduce the violence and how to accept others and their feelings, since the institution is having diverse background of learners. Then the second last, we talked of cybersecurity, putting cybersecurity that can combat cyber crimes. Now, when you look at the current situation, we focus on so much online learning now due to pandemic the learning system has changed. It's online. However, during online, cyberspace has so many information, and information that could be wrong, that could affect our society and trigger a lot of things. So we looked at that to strengthen. So many students are now all over the world or all over Africa. It's using virtual way of studying. So there's need for cybersecurity defense mechanism that can combat that wrong information or biased information that can affect our students and that can lead to violence or conflict within our community. Then lastly, we looked at the parental involvement. The fact that we in Uganda, there's so much less involvement of parents in, let me say, learning. The parents only leave learning to student themselves alone, like at school. The learning does not go beyond school. So that's the little that we discussed, but we had so much to share due to time. Thank you so much.
Totally. Indeed. Yeah, thank you, Francis, for sharing this. And I like the fact that you actually address the issues quite comprehensively, looking at both content and behaviors of students, even to the sitting arrangement in class. This is, I think, very important in terms of creating a safe learning environment to foster learning in class and in the school. I think also this same approach applies to non-formal education space, which means the programs that some of you are running, because I imagine not everybody here comes from a formal school setting, so you are more involved in organizing peaks or other kind of activity with young people. I think this component has to be taken into account. You talked about discipline too, which is something we had a lot of argument about yesterday. So it depends on what you define as discipline, and maybe something that we have to look at maybe when we go later into discussing the element in details with my colleague Sushit. But then what kind of discipline, how is those discipline enforced? Is it with the use of certain kind of valor, or the idea of spare the rod and spoil the child that we argued or discussed about yesterday, or how? So these are factors that you have to take into consideration, and not to kind of justify violence in a way of instilling knowledge in class. Okay, thank you so much. Feel free to share again your thoughts in the chat, and if anyone wish to add, you are highly welcome to do so. I will take you now, Manasseh, and after I will take the group, the last group, I think, which is group number 5. That would be Gloria, I guess. But Manasseh, you have now the mic.
Excuse me, number 4 hasn't presented as well, so.
Okay, sure, Hilary. Sure.
Yes.
Manasseh.
Okay. So do not forget about us, please.
Yeah, I assure you, I won't forget you.
Okay.
You have a space here, you can participate, so I won't discriminate against you.
Yeah.
It's an assurance.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. This is Group 1 reporting on context sensitivity. So we were able to come up with some ideas, some thoughts, and we went this way. The context sensitivity is having to understand the context of the school, the people, the environment, and then understanding their differences. That's the teachers, the students, and the society itself. You need to understand their differences to be able to communicate or teach well. Then we also said that as a trainer, you have to understand the environment. That is where people come from, their norms, the group and age. Then what you teach as a trainer, it has to be well understood by all the groups and the ages as well. Then we also said that it is making the environment in and around the school have natural feelings as possible. That we give the students confidence, as well as the society itself. We have confidence to be able to participate in what the school is doing. Then we also said that as a trainer, you need to understand the environment, like we earlier said. You need to understand the environment of your learners. You need to understand where they come from. You need to understand their activities at home. as much to be able to understand why or how they behave over there in the school. So, and you need to understand their respective needs as well. So whatever it is you are teaching the students should be able to address their needs and not contradict anything. Okay. So, and we also said that it is understanding the people, their beliefs, and knowing how to communicate your thoughts as a trainer in a way that it doesn't cause nuisance. It is also about minimizing and intending consequence. All right. So that's what we're able to come up with as for the context sensitivity. Then we bringing it down to safe learning environment. Yeah. We were able to bring out some thoughts too. And we said it is about being able to give your learners safety, which boosts their confidence. And then it is giving the learners room for expression where they can communicate. And this, safe learning environment in question does not necessarily have to do with the environment alone. Okay. It has to do with, it just has to do with their own confidence, having to give them a space where they can communicate. Then we talked about participatory and collaborative learning. We also came out with some thoughts too. And we said it is about having both the teachers, which is the trainers, the students, and the community participate in the school activities. So in Nigeria here,
Manasseh, because of time, maybe you don't have to go into the details of the other elements since you were only to work on element number 1, but you can put like your thoughts and feedback on the other element in the chat as a message in the chat on each of the elements that you discussed. But thank you so much for sharing about the concept sensitivity issues in your group or elements in your group and the different suggestions that you brought on how we can foster this space, understanding the individuals, their environment, their social background, and all that, and working with the different actors to bring them into play. So that's really wonderful. Thank you. And I will now take Gloria if you are ready before I go to Hilary. But if you are not ready, we can go to Hilary because I think he also had some points to add to context sensitivity. So maybe I'll take you first, Hilary, and then Gloria, you'll be the last if you are available.
Thank you very much. I would like us to put the issue of context sensitivity approach in the layman's language. And I think that would go to mean tagging maybe information to specific individual and societal needs. You understand the complex historical and contemporary environment within which the information you are giving or the initiative you have is being conducted, and maybe the potential impact. If we are talking in the context of conflict resolution.
So Hilary, it's your group. Pardon me, Hilary, you did work on role modeling in your group, right? So if it's possible to focus on that element, number 4, which your group worked on, and then you can add your comment about context sensitivity in the chat. So we can get to other group.
For group number 4, we agreed in unison that role modeling is a way of forming character by way of leading by example. In other words, it is a thing of do as I do, not as I say. And then looking at what we should do to strengthen the element of role modeling, we are saying we should strive to improve on our communication skills as a way of listening and talking. Then we should be able to demonstrate confidence and leadership by way of staying calm, positive, and connected when situations are hard. Then we are saying we must be unique, be different, be proud of who we are, and know that it doesn't mean standing with the whole group that we are going to be right, that we can be right even when we are unique and doing things differently. And that role models should be humble enough and willing to accept the mistakes, should be accountable to themselves and honest as well as to others by accepting mistakes, apologizing, and making for those mistakes. And that we should be able to be constant learners. There should be constant learning where we can challenge ourselves to get out of our comfort zones and meet other people and learn from them, because a role model is not a person who thinks he knows it all. And that we should be able to respect and have concern for others, show gratitude where we have to, and do not step on the other people. Basically, that is all that we came up with regarding role modeling.
Thank you so much, Hilary, and that's really wonderful ideas that your group worked on. Feel free to share in the chat. Let me take Gloria, who was in the group number 5. I see your hand up, Yehu, but if there's something you need to add to any of the group, kindly do add it in the chat as we are losing time already. But let me take the last group from group number 5 with Gloria, if you are ready.
Yes, thank you so much. We looked at group 5, which picked on an element on the whole school approach. So on this element, we discussed that it means a whole lot of the structural and programmatic design of the school, and it actually goes beyond what the learners learn, and also contributes to the many processes that can ensure effective learning. So under this, we identified a number of items that can improve practice. We looked at how the curriculum should be designed, and also harnessing the resources, and how the communities can participate. I think in most African schools, systems, we have what we call the parent partnership associations, how we can effectively partner with those, and also engagement of stakeholders. So, and lastly, we also looked at how schools or institutions of learning can be innovative enough to encompass other issues instead of just concentrating on mainstream education. So in terms of practice, I'll just highlight what we have discussed. We looked at how we can customize the activities on the learners, putting the learners first. Of course, that should be the priority, because the learners have to be given the opportunity to speak and also be creative, and if possible, ensure that the learners are, can be, introduce paradigms where the learners can work in teams and be collaborative. So in that way, we are ensured that we can be transformative in terms of performance and also how the services are delivered. So we also identified how the stakeholders and communities can work together. So in this aspect, we are looking at stakeholders that can support the schools in various ways, maybe resource mobilization and various supports that can be identified within the community. And also we also looked at the how we can identify the role models from the communities, because it's one thing to have a teacher standing in front or a lecturer, but we need to look at how others, or if it's university, how alumni has actually delivered there in the community. How have they scaled down their skills to transform or to address social problems. So the other thing also, we looked at adaptive or rather inclusivity in terms of how the processes of the school are done, and in terms of facilities, inclusivity in terms of disability. How are we ensuring that there is the facilities are able to cater for people of all kinds of special needs and and the like, and how we can harness resources to address all those issues. So we also looked at access to administrative support. This is one cardinal issue because sometimes we have schools have got no maybe issues from a community or parents or even the students have no support in terms of psychological support, mental health, and also having access to reporting systems that are effective. Once you report the issue, how fast is the administration able to address those issues? So in all the aspect of inclusivity, we need to ensure all those administrative support is included. So lastly, I think I can talk about the innovation in terms of curriculum, how we can review the education curriculums to reflect not only mainstream education, but also what is prevailing in the local and global challenges. Because it's one thing to educate on normative issues, but to be practical of what is actually being experienced in the community is very important. That way people can relate to and also devise strategies that they can address. So also ensure schools are safe and the students feel safe. So all those issues, what I've observed is that most of these things have been identified, and I think all these elements actually reinforce each other. All these strategies reinforce each other. And yeah, so that's basically it.
Thank you so much, Gloria. That's really wonderful. And thank you to each and every one of you for sharing this wonderful feedback about the different elements of transformative pedagogy, which I think, if you agree with me, that when we are able to put this into perspective and into structure, we are able to actually build, transform human beings that are not only transformed in themselves, but can also contribute to transforming society. And this is what we would like our educational program to be like, and what we would also want even the formation programs that we run in different clubs and associations and movement organizations to be like. So rethinking those transformative process and the theory of change, how the human beings evolve and what space we can provide for them. To conclude maybe on this transformative pedagogy aspect, let me invite my colleague Sushit, who will take over in the next session. Sushit, yes, thank you. And thank you all of you for participating in the discussions and sharing your feedback.
Sorry, when I try to share the screen, everything else disappears and I cannot unmute myself even. So managed to. Thank you, Richard, and thank you for everyone for these wonderful reflections. I was really inspired to listen to these critical reflections that you brought together. I just wanted to highlight a few things from these points, and I know there is some conversations going in the chat as well. I'll connect to that as well. So maybe I quickly touch on some of the elements and what you presented, and so maybe starting with participatory and collaborative learning. As you said, participation is a right, right? We understand participation to be a right, and even in education, that's the same. It shouldn't be this, what was in that video of empty glass being filled is not what we are looking at, but we are looking at flowers blooming. That's what transformative pedagogy is about. So we want learners to be, or children, participants in our program to be fully participating, engaged, and have the feeling ownership and self-driven learning, as one of you highlighted, to be part of this. And that requires genuine participation, not just running through activities, but creating spaces that encourage genuine participation. At the same time, this participation, when individuals participate, it has to be also with others who are different. This encounter of diversity, schools are an important place for this. When for the first time, sometimes from a certain community, a young person walks in and starts to encounter others from different backgrounds, different communities. So how do they then relate to that? How do we understand each other? So this collaborative learning aspect is so important, that in that it is about the skills that you need to work with the other. It's also about the empathy that you build towards the other, those who are different from you in your classroom, in your school, in your community. This can encourage that empathy. It's also about dialogue. We are from different background, and that empathy and understanding comes when we are in dialogue with one another. So how do we encourage dialogue among our learners, and instead of education being centered around the teacher, but more dialogical approaches between learners, so they learn from each other's experiences. And as somebody was pointing out in the chat, how does identity fit in? When we have people of different identity backgrounds in the same non-formal education activity or in the classroom, how do we enrich this sharing among them? Their exposure to differences, exposure to different identities and the needs of those identities, so that there is empathy. So that's very important. So that's around participatory and collaborative learning. I saw a very interesting chat conversation going around context sensitivity. And I agree with, who was it highlighting? Vega Yehu, that Vega Yehu is highlighting very much do no harm as a principle in context sensitivity. Context sensitivity means that we are not going to escalate some of the conflict issues that are there and create more harm than intended in the process. So we need to be sensitive in that way. But in how we look at context sensitivity, we are actually going beyond that, Vega Yehu. We are not just, it's not about preventing the negative, but also positively engaging the context. And I think that's what Hillary is trying to point out. When we have a history of racism in the country, or let's say taking the example of South Africa, that is a hot topic. This is a sensitive topic of apartheid and how that evolved, the racism evolved, ethnicism has evolved. But we can't avoid it in the classroom. We need to talk about it, we need to bring that in, and we need to do that in sensitive ways. It's not just to bring in the most sensitive topic and drop it in the middle of the learning activity and let it erupt, but to build a safe space. So that's how it connects to the next element. But within a safe space, how do we bring in these sensitive issues into the conversation? I think it's been in that way contemporary, as Hillary is pointing out. Contemporary, and also sometimes we have a lot of things going on in the society, but in the classroom, we're talking about something else. I always say, when we have elections, do we really talk about that elections in the classrooms? But then we talk about post-election violence, but we've never really used the educational space to talk about, prepare the learners to what's happening in society when there's a mass scale election process going on. So how do we bring in this, what's happening in our society to the conversations and the learning within the activities that we do? So being contemporary is very important, as Hillary is pointing out in that way as well. Few other things that I wanted to highlight within the safe learning environment. Again, I think it connects to the issue of identity as well. There are identities that of minorities that are not really sometimes accepted as well equally in society. So how do we ensure that minority voices are strengthened and they feel included in the classroom, whether there is a person with a disability or because of a gender related identity, if they've been excluded, how do we strengthen their inclusion? How do we do that is part of that safe learning environment reflections as well. I will then jump to this issue of role modeling. It's very important that role modeling is also about what we talked about yesterday, that role modeling is not to pretend to be perfect. As I think Hillary was talking about role modeling, it's more about being authentic. It's not about pretending to be perfect. It's not about being a perfect person as a role model, but it's about being an authentic person. And I think vulnerability can be role modeled as well. I think sometimes that's, if we don't have acknowledge and be authentic and role model vulnerability, then we are going to create a place where everybody pretends to be perfect. And that's not encouraging of transformation. So authenticity and being willing to be vulnerable is important, and that's not necessarily always part of our culture, because the teacher is supposed to, or the facilitator is supposed to be the perfect one, right? That's sometimes the expectation, and then to be vulnerable is a bit more difficult. So that's an important part I wanted to highlight. With the whole school approach, I very much agree with, I think it was Gloria who spoke about the whole school approach. It's very important how we bring the whole community, the school. I also want you to think, when we talk about the formal education setting, we talk about whole school approach and whole school and community approach. What does it mean in your programs? How do you bring in the larger system? So yes, we might be doing a workshop for young people or workshop for a group of school dropout children. But what does it mean then when we say whole community in that? Our program is targeting children who are dropouts. Then, but if we are thinking always the systemic approach to solving problems, we understand if they are dropouts by just engaging them in a school-based or educational program, that itself is not going to be sufficient to solve some of the other issues they face. So how do we bring the community into this process and engage the community, as you said, the Parents Association in the case of a school, religious leaders in issues of conflict can play a very important role. We can also liaise with other stakeholders in the community. So how do we build these connections and even sometimes have partnerships between the educational institution and outside organizations or even businesses in terms of partnerships with considering the sensitivities involved as well. The last thing I want to highlight in terms of these elements is maybe an element that was a bit, it can be a bit misleading in how it's phrased. So we call it supporting learner-led action. Yes, it's about learner-led approach, but it's not all of the learner-led approach. I think participatory and collaborative learning highlights very much that learner-led approach as well, putting learners at the center of the process, and that's why we call it participatory and collaborative learning. This learner-led action then is another step in that. So you engage them in participatory and collaborative learning, but then once they start to talk about the issues they're facing, how can they work together to take action that transforms their society? And that's part of the process is what we call learner-led actions. It's almost as if, let's say we are talking about elections in a process and the learning activities are around election. And at the end of that lesson, the classroom decides that they want to run a small campaign about nonviolent elections. And instead of just talking about the learning in the classroom or in the workshop, they actually will then work together to design a campaign talking about preventing violence during elections. Or they will engage in learning activities around gender, and then maybe they will do a theater in the community about gender-based violence. So it's that action part of doing social transformation, the actual peace-building project in a way that the learners who go through this process, it's not about just learning, but it's also that action of being a peace builder that in their own capacity, that's important. So those are some of the elements I wanted to highlight here. And I think Gloria was very rightly pointing out that these are reinforcing each other. Each of these elements, when we start to talk about one, we end up using the explanations about the others also because they come together to form this transformative pedagogy approach. So I would maybe just quickly open up for a few comments more overall, not just one or two about specific elements, but any connections that you are seeing between these elements and how do you see? Does it make sense, the transformative pedagogy approach, and what are your reflections? Anybody who wants to share? Yes, Waka, please.
Okay, so I actually like all the conversation about all the measures and all, but I think we have actually forgotten one key element as well, because when you look at the living conditions of either the teacher and the learner, I think it also plays a big role. Because if you try to look into different classes, you find that those who actually don't do so much is because they're either from a house with a lot of disabilities or like in terms of chaos, and maybe they have not eaten anything, or maybe there was no electricity. So I think the living condition, actually, we need to also look at it as well in a way, because most guys, like most students who are from families that are not really having good life, like their standard of living is too low, they tend not to really have open mind, or their mind is not really settled in class. They always think of what am I going to eat, or how am I going to treat myself in this. So I think living conditions also, we need to also look at it in a way. Yeah, that's the only thing that I would actually try to add to all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Waka. Yeah, in a way, we consider that sort of conditions also as building a safe learning environment. So we talk about psychological safety, physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety. So this safety is multifaceted that we need to ensure. Because it's the educational space, we consider it in the context of building a safe learning environment. And in the context of conflicts, there's many other types of safety also that was highlighted that needs to be put together as well. So very much agree, Waka. Ruth, please go ahead. Ruth? Ruth, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to second the previous comment where I said the living conditions are very, very important, and looking at where the learners are coming from, are they safe, or what are the living conditions? Right now I'm conducting a research based on that. We have certain schools where learners are living in boarding houses, in shanty compounds, coming from remote areas. There's a school or some schools in Mbala district, that is northern part of Zambia. We still have learners coming from remote areas and villages, and then they decide to rent in shanty compounds where their safety is at risk. And in those shanty compounds, they're not safe. Sometimes you find a child is dozing throughout the class session. You would ask, what is the problem? Then this child would start crying and start explaining. So we need also to consider how can we take care of such learners, and to what extent can they be comfortable so that the learning takes place even for the most vulnerable children we have, by looking at the conditions of the environment where they're coming from.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruth. I think we need to look at that need throughout the process as well, in a way, right? We can look at it in that building the safe learning environment, but also I'm thinking that it has to be part of the conversations or the learning that we have also, right? The inequalities in society needs to be talked about. The haves and have-nots and these dynamics of poverty and its implications on development of a child, all of this needs to be part of the conversations we have in educational spaces as well. And then we need to talk about what do we do to transform this. So I agree that as educators, we need to, whether it's formal or non-formal, we need to set the safe learning environment for the learners so that they feel comfortable to engage in the process. But at the same time, we also know that nobody else is going to come and solve our issues as well. So if you are a community that's facing difficulty economically, socially, then we need to also create the agents of change within that community from the next generation that can socially move forward. If it's a community that where gang violence is very prevalent, it's very easy for somebody to drop into the same violence, right? So we need to take this generational approach, change by generation, so that we talk about that challenge in the classroom about violence, how it impacts different people, and then see as these learners or these young people, children, how would we transform that in our community? So I agree that exactly to both of you about living conditions. Living conditions need to be part of the safety we ensure, but it also needs to be part of the learning and the transformations that we pursue. So if that's a critical issue in the community, then maybe we need to establish a community farm Maybe that's the working together. The learner-led action can be about building a community farm together so that it supports the food nutrition needs of the food security needs of the learners, right? Or if there is another sort of need, can they start a small support scholarship program for some of the learners who need that support? So learner-led actions can also be a way that we encourage transformation around the needs of the inequalities as well. I also wanted to highlight what somebody highlighted about cybersecurity. So again, I think cybersecurity is one aspect of that, and that's important to address. But at the same time, most of the violence that children and young people face also come from their peers. The harassment that happens online, the hate messages that get shared online, all of this is by children and young people themselves, or somebody who has grown into that from as a child and young person. So how do we encourage and talk about this digital citizenship idea, right? What is our role online? Can we just go and comment and hurt somebody because we are anonymous? So these ethical considerations of interacting in a virtual world, what does this mean? I think that also has to be part of the transformative learning experiences that we provide. Is there any other person who wants to add before we move? I am not able to see the hands. Okay, anyone who wants to add anything, or shall we move forward?
You can move forward.
Okay, great. So then I will introduce a very practical tool we call the learning process. So I quickly introduce this learning process, and then so we've now talked about the pedagogical approach, right? So these are more the approach that we want to have. But then if we are doing an activity, we need to also think of how we bring this pedagogical approach quickly into a learning activity that we are running. So let's think of a workshop that you are doing, and in the second day, you need to run a learning activity about discrimination. And you are going to have 1.5 hours to talk about, in a transformative way, about discrimination with these participants in your program. How do we think of approaching the design for that? Those who are teachers or in educational spaces might say, yes, we need to first come up with learning objectives. What do we want to achieve, etc. And then we use an approach called the learning process to design the flow of our learning program activities. So I want to quickly introduce this learning process and the different stages so that it becomes a very practical guide of when you have to do a training, when you have to do a session, that this can be a tool that you use to make sure it's participatory, make sure it's reflective, make sure it's leading to action, etc. So the learning process has 6 different stages. First of all, it starts with the motivation, right? Motivation is the first process. We need to get the buy-in. We need to get the engagement of the participants in our programs. So motivation can come in 2 different ways. One, we say intrinsic motivation. The other, we say extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is when you relate the topic, why we are talking about this, what is it that we will gain out of this meaning making to the participant. So that's intrinsic, it connects to their internal needs. The extrinsic motivation is by how we create excitement, maybe with a small activity, or playing a game, or bringing a song into the class or the workshop. Somehow we create the excitement. So that also can be part of the way that we create the motivation to engage in this process. Of course, it needs to connect to the overall activity. You can't just do something and just randomly do it, but you need to build so that it flows as if it's a seamless step. So that's the motivation. Then in a participatory process, then we will introduce the main activity. So it might be a group work-based activity, or a game that you want to play, or you might ask them to go through newspapers and do some analysis about different types of news that's on those newspapers. So whatever the activity based on the objectives you have, you give the instructions and let the participants work collaboratively, either in small groups or sometimes individually. Whatever way, you give that space for the learner to start exploring instead of explaining everything yourself at the beginning. So you're just giving instructions, you are giving an activity and a participatory methodology that you selected, and they go through that experience. So this might be a role play, this might be a game with a ball, this might be a small, another type of activity. For example, yesterday we did a game or activity with you. We had this poll, agree, disagree, or middle, right? So that's a methodology we used or activity we used to explore a topic. Instead of us saying this is how it should be, we put those statements, we allowed you the space to think, do I agree with this? Do I disagree with this? Am I in the middle? Once you've taken your position, then we move to the next step. We started to create dialogue between the different positions you have. So the next step is to ask questions and help people share different points of view based on the experience they had during the exploration, right? So if you played a game, what happened in the game? How did you feel? What can we think, take away from this? What are different points of view? So you encourage these questions instead of telling them. Again, it's about asking the questions so that they start to dialogue with one another. Then hopefully this encourages new discoveries. When you start, if you have good dialogue taking place, people will hear different points of view from other people, and that will bring new discoveries to them. And we call these discoveries aha moments, moments that transformations actually happen. Sometimes when we realize something, when things click, we go, aha. When that moment when the light bulb goes in our head, right? Sometimes we have these in cartoons when a light bulb goes off above our head. So how do we encourage that sort of discoveries? And I think it's about creating the process, and we might not always control when discoveries happen. For some, it might be already in the exploration that they start to discover something when they start to reflect on the question in the activity. Or for some, listening to a different point of view during the dialogue, or for others in the reflection. So discoveries can happen in a way throughout the process, although it's depicted in this particular place. So once we have done the learning activity, then it's important to discuss what is the reflection. How does this apply to me, my life, to my community? What does this mean? Yes, we need to make that connection, help create the space for them to make the connection. Yes, we played a game, we talked about discrimination. What does this mean in my life? How am I going to relate this to my life, my experience? That space is what we call reflection. And that is very important so that learners internalize the learning, right? And then finally, we need to encourage action. So understanding this reflection around discrimination, what would you do differently? So we encourage an action, whether it's individual action or whether it's collective action, as a classroom deciding that we will prevent discrimination by doing this. We no longer will call each other names in our classroom because it hurts some people. So that's a collective action and an agreement like that. So this is a simple tool that we call the learning process, but it has been very powerful and a transformative tool in a way that helps us design meaningful programs. If you have a mobile phone with you, I encourage you to take a picture. We'll drop a picture to the WhatsApp group also, because we will use this in the next part of the session today, right? Any questions about this learning process? I've been talking quite a lot into this part, but any questions before we move on? Is the learning process clear? Is it?
Very clear.
Okay, I see Gloria giving a thumbs up and Kobna said it's clear. So, okay, so then what we will do is once we come back, we'll try to use this learning process. And then for now, we will take a short break. So can we then break for 10 minutes and then we come back? So once we come back, what we will do is to put together these 6 elements of transformative pedagogy and then the learning process into a concrete situation and discuss how we apply it. So now the time is, in maybe it's 47 for you, I think, 47. So 57, we can come back.
Udlula yena, hayi, hayi.
Explained within the last session. I would like to take the time to remind you of the 6 stages quickly of the learning process: motivation, exploration, dialogue, discovery, and reflection. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to explore together 5 different real-life scenarios, and you will be requested to apply the 6 elements as well as the stages of the learning process. Through planning an activity or a collection of activities that you can adapt and customize as needed to include them within your projects, programs, or initiatives, you need to make sure that whatever you design, whatever you plan is realistic as much as possible. So these activities are going to be planned within a group work, so which means we are going to be splitted into groups. And within the group work, you need to help each other to strengthen the knowledge among yourselves, as well as to motivate skills and to develop skills for peace building and provide examples of actions that you can organize in African communities and contribute to challenging stereotypes, prejudices, promote dialogue, raise awareness about issues, and the most important is to promote positive narratives and lead a change through innovative solutions and durable ones as well, and community engagement. Nonetheless, you will be able to using the learning process and lead collective actions through envisioning real-life scenarios, create your own durable and sustainable solution, and take the ownership of the process and the outcomes as well. So we are going to split into 5 groups, and the scenarios will be represented on the Google Jamboard. We will have 30 minutes for this activity. And if there is anyone struggling with the internet connection or with the electricity, disconnected from the group, please come back and use the chat box to share your reflections. And that's it from my end. Sushith, can you split us into 5 groups, please?
Yes, I will send you to the 5 rooms. Lena,
Is there
are we sharing
anything?
the
I'm sorry,
link?
Sushith, but before we go, is there anything that you need me to clarify more on this activity? Okay, I don't see hands raised, so which means hopefully that everyone is on the same route. So you can split us, Sushith, enjoy the discussions and have a wonderful time together.
Needed a bit more time, but I'm also sure from the participation I saw that we've really covered some ground. So now I just want us to quickly look at what we have just done, right? And we reflect on it, looking back at those 6 elements that we had talked about previously and the learning process: context sensitivity, safe learning environment, participatory and collaborative learning, role modeling, whole school approach, supporting learner-led action. So I just want to get a feel, just some quick reflection from us. How was it for you planning the activity in your group? How was it for you? How did you find it? All right, so I would like some mics to be on mute. If you want to contribute, you can raise your hand. Esu, could you kindly share your reflection?
Thank you so much. Sorry for my environment. I ran out of electricity and it's off, so I'm back and in a noisy environment. But I'm glad to join the discussion in our group, and we were talking about how interreligious group resolved content of conflict. Then we look at the safe environment, which is really, that can really harmonize the conflict between religious different groups. And it was really wonderful discussion that we're engaging in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What was it challenging? Wegayehu?
Yes.
How was it? Was it challenging? How was the process for you?
Yeah, to some extent, it's challenging, but we enjoyed discussing with these the pointers. So it's very, very nice. So it's exciting. So they're very nice questions.
Okay, but concretely, how were you able to bring out those elements in your own conversation?
Yeah, in the case of the group 2, we have been discussing about how we solve the conflicts within the society. How do we engage students and initiate them? How we encourage them to actively participate in the peaceful dialogue and discussion among the society. There is a conflict within the society, but as a teacher, as a peace educator, we are expected to motivate them first. We are expected to inspire them by respecting the school rules and regulations and responding to the ethical demands of the society and understanding the context. And by doing that, especially through peace clubs, we encourage the students to get the peace values, the peace education, the peace values, and then we encourage them to disseminate the peace values within the society and the community engage in peaceful discussion and dialogue. So in that way, we select different transformative pedagogy elements, such as role modeling, safe learning environment, the whole school approach, because education cannot be successful, cannot be achieved without participating in the community and participating the parents, the teachers, and the learners. So it's all about.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So one thing that stood out for you was the role modeling. Ruth, in your conversation, what is that one element of transformative pedagogy, transformative learning that stood out for you when you were having the conversation?
Yeah, it's all about participating the whole.
So, sorry, I was asking Ruth. Ruth, if you can hear.
For us within the group, we discussed that one of the key elements was context sensitivity, where under interreligious conflicts or intercultures conflicts, you need to be very, very sensitive to the manner in which you approach the members of different groups in order for them to come together and unite. So we also discussed having dialogue sessions with the leaders of different religious groups to influence the members of the different religious groups so that we start cooperating with one another and involve them. That is also under participatory and cooperative learning. Involve them. They should be able to be participants by allowing them to come up with songs that would promote unity among the different religious groups that are there in Cameroon. And then we also discussed that we need also to create.
Ruth, you don't have to present the report of what happened in the group. I just wanted to have a feel of your own reflection around this, what stood out for you, and then how practically these elements the learning process were included in the conversation. So you could still use like 30 more seconds to share something.
Okay, thank you. All right. What stood out for me was promotion of unity among the interreligious groups through mediation, which is one of the most important methods of promoting peace. And then that is under the second element, that is participatory and collaborative learning, where you involve the members of different religious groups to promote peace and unity.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruth. Cyprian, what was the activity you planned in your own group? And which of the elements would you want to reflect on based on how you applied it in the conversation?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. In our group, that is group 4, our activity was sensitizing the youth on peace and inclusivity. So we wanted to find ways on how we can include the youth, especially the disabled youth, how they can be able to feel they are part of the flock and they're not unwanted. So the element that we focused on mostly was a dialogue, as well as how we can help them be able to participate and collaborative learning. So we're able to tackle a few things on it so that we can provide them with an opportunity.
Cyprian, sorry, I think the network, it's a bit unstable there. If any other person will want to share, like Suchit asked in the chat box. Sorry, Cyprian, the network is breaking. We can't hear you clearly. Okay, I have Eunice. Eunice would like to share. So Eunice, looking at the question that the way what Suchit has asked,
okay,
how was it to try to use the learning process in planning your specific activity? How was it, and how useful was it, or how unuseful was it?
Okay, thank you, Michael. The learning process was very useful. It was a useful tool when it comes to preparing for the activity, since it directs you from step to step how you go through your activities until when you come with the action plan. So it was so helpful. Yes. Would you want me to share what we did in our group?
Not exactly, but you could just mention the activity that you had talked about, just to mention.
Okay, our activity was based in Egypt, a scenario in Egypt, and you were to engage dialogue with the young boys on gender issues, and to advocate for women's rights, and to advocate against FGM. So we were to organize them and train them and have a dialogue with them on issues around FGM, and building their capacity on how they can fight against FGM, raising awareness through activities like sports, using sports to raise awareness, engaging them in school dialogues, and also engaging with community elders, duty bearers, policymakers, on how we can fight for women's rights, and how we can come up with laws that involve penalizing the perpetrators and bringing justice to these girls who are victims of FGM. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Thank you very much. I think when we go back again, we look at those 6 elements, we realize that in the course of our planning, right? In the course of our planning, that sometimes one of the elements would stand out very much for us in the work. However, the 6 elements are interconnected. It's like a circle that work together in all this process, all right? And if I am to ask Alice, in your group, how challenging was it for you to use that process vis-a-vis the transformative pedagogy? The process of planning, process of building the motivation and getting active participation. How was it for you?
Okay, thank you, Michael. Unfortunately, I joined in the middle of the discussion, so I missed part of the discussion. But the part I picked most was on how to engage people and start a conversation on how to solve the issues that they may be facing in the community. So one of the activities that was mentioned was like playing a football match, then starting a conversation around that area so that it is easy for them to relate together, because playing the football is more like breaking the ice, and especially when, in my own thoughts, when we talk about football, it's more like a friendly match between two different communities, whereby it gets them together into a common discussion. So for me, that is, that is what I briefly captured, because I've been having internet challenges throughout the day. So maybe I'll keep on getting more information as the discussion goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. And I see that some of us have already put some of the things we shared in our group and on the Jamboard. And one important question that we ask in this entire process is, are there competencies that we need that support this process, this learning, transformative learning process, the transformative pedagogy? And so I am going to ask my colleague, Suchit, to journey with us briefly on, are there competencies, are there connections that link these competencies with the transformative pedagogy? Suchit?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for everyone for the group work that you did and the reflections you share. Just a quick comment on that. I know for some, it's always like we are thinking of a program, and then there's many activities in the program. And then inside the activities, there's sessions, content, and the approach of how we run that session inside that program. So we were trying to push you to go into a specific session, because then you need to think of this content part of your activities as well. It's not just to think of activities, okay, we'll do this and that in a programmatic sense, but it's also the approach that you use, how you facilitate the learning, etc. And that's, I think, what transformative pedagogy is very much about. It's not just the designing, okay, activity 1, 2, and 3 will help us achieve the objective kind of program design. It goes a bit beyond that, a bit more detailed into talking each activity, how within that activity, what do we need to cover as learning? How do we build a learning process? How do we create a learning transformative space for learning, etc. So I'm happy to see all these reflections coming together, and I think that's what this framework is about. By discussing the transformative pedagogy elements and then the learning process, this is the framework that makes it that you have to discuss about these things in a critical way. And as you cascade this, I hope that you will be able to introduce this to other young people, educators, facilitators that you will be working with as well when you cascade the program. Then just quickly to connect to what Michael mentioned in terms of competencies. So through this process, what we are trying to do is actually build the competencies of our learners, right? We want the transformation. Transformation means that they are more competent in different ways. They are more empathic, they are more respectful, they are able to solve the problems, they are able to appreciate the diversity and be in solidarity with one another. So here, in this slide that I'm sharing are some different competencies that we think are important to build peace and resilience in children and young people through our program. So as you think of the design of your learning activities, think of this level as well. How is my program helping to develop critical thinking? How is it enhancing? Where in this is self-awareness, self-confidence being enhanced? These are things you already talked about. I'm just summing it up. And you already talked about intercultural communication. You already talked about problem solving. So all of these competencies is what is sort of the layer that we are enhancing through the transformative learning. I think all of these elements you already talked about, so I don't need to go much more into details about them. And yes, exactly. Gloria is saying the challenge is that we are too quick sometimes to resolve the problems, that we have a desire to resolve the problem quickly. And as educators, we know that we might not be the one that resolves the problem. And in the task that you were given, I was very, in the wording that we put down, sometimes educationists cannot resolve the conflicts. What we can do is contribute towards that peace building. So the educational activity by talking, getting young people to think critically, trying to engage them in critical learning experience, we are contributing to peace building, but we are not necessarily the one who might resolve the big level of the conflict as well, right? So in the education space, there's a slight difference of the longevity of the approach that we take in building the next generation, those who are transformed through the process. And it's not always not only to work at the top. As peace builders, I know many of you are peace builders, and you do a lot of advocacy. So you work with the top as youth for peace advocates. But transformative pedagogy is to do that, but also to do with the bottom, with the young people, with the children, in engaging them in this transformative learning. And as it was pointed in the chat, that's a long-term process. We need to think generations in this transformation, not just maybe 1 or 2 years even. How do we change by generations? So I hope these conversations are really helping you think about educational programs that you can run and how to strengthen the existing programs that you have, and how you can build new programs that respond to this. Even when you think of a proposal as a young person, if your youth organization is going to develop a proposal, see how these elements are put in the design of that program you want to design. So I hope all of this will be useful for that process. So tomorrow we will come back. We'll have a short time in the first part of the session tomorrow to quickly talk about programs, how we think of programs, and how can we look at incorporating this into programming. And then we also will touch on this topic of monitoring progress, or some people call it monitoring and evaluation, but in terms of monitoring progress in our learners, not at a very complicated level, not so much in the project management level, but at the level of a learner. How do we know that they are learning? How do we know that they're transforming? So we will touch about some tools that you can use in this kind of process, because things like peace education is much more difficult sometimes to evaluate than other types of activities, right? And then tomorrow we will be also the final session of our workshop. So there'll be space for you to make connections and reflect about the overall workshop and the guide that we've introduced, and to think of what you want to do going forward. How will you cascade? How will you carry this training to another group inside your country? Or will you work with school level? Would you, what type of activities would you want to do as the way forward after the workshop? So we will have time for each country group to plan that. And then finally, the last part of the session tomorrow will be a closing session with the time for you to share your own reflections. And then we'll also have a ceremonial closing with the African Union representatives as well as UNESCO IGBA representatives. So I hope this has been useful today. And then thank you very much for the active engagement. I also take this chance to thank the facilitators, Mena, Richard, Michael, as well as Repta, Henok, everybody who's doing the background work to support this process as well. So look forward to connecting tomorrow.
So just maybe before we close, we may take some reactions.
Yes, Mena, sorry, I forgot. Let's
end it with this positivity now. Let's end it with this positivity, okay? Okay, how do you feel by the end of the third day of our workshop? Today is our last day. We hope you feel you are learning in a safe learning environment, happy, feeling good. Some of you may be tired, so use the chat books to just type the number that you feel today.
Thank you, Suchi. Thank you.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of tired people, so I don't want to keep you waiting. Thank you so much. Sushi, would you like to add something?
No, I think we're good. If anybody wants to share something, I saw some people, yeah,
they are
is there any reason that you're, okay, yeah. If you need anybody, if you feel sad and you need to talk about something, we are here for a few more minutes. Feel free to reach out but otherwise, have a good evening.
Great, have a good evening, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.